On today's show, could you imagine wanting by choice to face Fernando Tatis Jr. when it counts most? We are recapping last night's walk-off win from El Nino himself, as well as talking about Yu Darvish making his return, the general vibes of the Padres, whether or not this team can be stopped, Merrill being at it yet again, and a whole lot more. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Thursday, September 5th. As always, I'm your host with sometimes, occasionally, but certainly not always the most, Javier Reyes. You may be familiar with my other baseball-related work over at justbaseball.com, where I write about not just the Padres, but general baseball stuff. And I'm also wearing a really cool hoodie that you can go check out. And also, you can check out my new podcast, Baseball versus the World, which is about general baseball topics. It's been a little bit off lately, but don't worry, it's coming back, I promise. And we're doing a fantasy draft soon, so that should be a lot of fun. And now there's football coming back. You can also follow me on Twitter, at Javipeno, the best handle in the game, JAVIIPENO. You can message me on there if you want your questions read on the show. We're going to be doing a mailbag this coming Monday, so look forward to doing that as well. You can leave some YouTube comments, I'll read those, and also you can DM at LO_Padres, which is a good account to follow for updates on the show. Today's episode, guys, is brought to you by what? I want you guys to guess. Real quick, guess what today's episode is brought to you by? It's by Prize Picks, guys. This episode, it's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use code all lowercase LockedOnMLB to win $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the bonus. Go check that out, guys. Prize Picks, run your game. And man, here's the thing. Am I still a little bit sick? A tiny bit. You guys might be able to tell, all right? If you see a little bit of a glitch if you're watching on video, especially, that's because I paused because I had to cough. But nonetheless, you know what really helps? When the Padres are playing well. Yes, I know scientifically that doesn't make you recover quicker, but man, what a joy this team is. Recapping last night's game. I'm gonna come in from the rafters. The way the Padres have been playing since the All-Star break. And in general, by the way, even before the All-Star break, yeah, they were only a game above 500 at the All-Star break, but even before then, they had a lot of really great moments. We had the Profar thing. We had Merrill being a really productive rookie, not a superstar the way he's been lately, but a really productive rookie. You'd seen, Jake Cronenworth making a bounce-back season. Everything was just, it was really cool. You had a bunch of comeback wins, Machado and all this stuff, right? It felt like it was, at very minimum, like better than the nightmare that was last year. In the nightmare of last year makes it that this season feels like we had to get through that in order to get to this, right? It's like, that's genuinely what it feels like. That in order to have this season, you had to have the disaster of 2023. And if you were lucky enough to brave through that, here we are. And my take is, they've been such a joy to watch this year. I'm someone who tries not to view sports in a very myopic way. I don't necessarily blame people if you do, more power to you, but for me, sometimes it's more than just wins and losses. And to me, this team has already satisfied that, right? So it's almost to the degree, of course, I care about what happens to them in the playoffs, but I'm really genuinely this has been such an amazing season that I'm not stressed. You know what I mean? I know that they kind of have to win. They're a team that's set up for now, but I'm not stressed about it. I don't know about you guys. I'm not that stressed. Maybe when we get actually to literally the playoff game, we'll see. Assuming they make it, of course. Maybe then the stress will come in, but I'm just not stressed about it. This has been such a delight of a season to follow at basically every turn. And honestly, I'm honored to be talking about them for you guys, viewers and listeners. Let's talk about it, though. Firstly, Yu Darvish making his return for the Padres. Everybody's known about this. Not only did he have the injury and whatnot, but he had his personal matter to attend to that the team was very patient on. He's been out since, let me make sure I get this right. He'd been out since May 29th, so it's been a really long time. And he was a really productive starter for them. Before he went to the IL/restricted list, he had a 3.2 ERA. And last night, you might think he pitched poorly. He goes 2 2/3, giving up 3 earned runs on 4 hits, 2 walks, 4 Ks. But in my opinion, I thought he looked really, really good. And I know that sounds weird. First start back off the IL, you only go 2 innings. I understand that. And it was 63 pitches across those 2 2/3. But again, first of all, again, it's his first time in a while, and he had that whole, personal matter to attend to on top of some of the injuries and stuff. So I wasn't expecting him to go very deep into this game. He's the type of pitcher that I think that the thing to watch for him for the rest of the year is just that they can build him up. Maybe he goes longer in his next start. Clearly, they were ready to turn this into a bullpen game, and the bullpen, by the way, was awesome. We'll talk about them in a second, but you can't ask for him to do too much so soon after coming off of this whole, an extended period of time being away from the game. And I understand he gave up 3 runs, but to me, I thought he looked great, and I'm going to explain why. Yes, he does give up a home run to Matt Vierling in the top of the first inning, but almost all of the big hits in this game, the ones that amount to runs, weren't necessarily pitches that I thought were thrown particularly poorly. First of all, I think it's worth mentioning that in just those 2 and 3 innings, 6 whiffs on his slider, which I think was very, very impressive. And the stuff that he threw in the zone, hitters weren't exactly making contact with it. His slider's velocity was up, and his sweeper's velocity was by a significant margin, which I thought was interesting. In total, he generated 11 whiffs, by the way, 2 more on his sweeper, 2 more on his sinker, 1 on his curveball. I just think he looked, the Matt Vierling home run, that was an up and inside pitch that maybe rode just a little bit too much and maybe didn't have enough bite to it, but it was outside the zone and up and in. So I want to give a little bit of credit to the hitter in that regard. And then he also gives up, I believe in the second inning, let me just make sure I get this right. It is the double to, was it Jace Jung? No, hold on one second. It's a hit, I think it was the Colt, I forgot which batter it was for Detroit that hits, he gives up 1 run, first of all, via sacrifice, like ground out and whatnot from Dylan Dingler. But he gives up a big single, I think, to Colt Keith. And even that one, when you look at it, it was some pitches outside the zone. The damage that was done to him last night were outside the zone pitches. And for someone who's just coming back, generating all those whiffs, getting 4 strikeouts, I think that for the big hits to be these pitches that were outside the zone, that to me is a little bit like you got to give credit to the hitters, at least a little bit. I know they aren't necessarily like superstar hitters, Matt Vierling and Dylan Dingler, right? Like, and Colt Keith necessarily, but in my opinion, I don't think Detroit's that bad. And I think that overall, like, I like to see that. Yes, he gave up the 3, but the fact that none of the pitches were really in the zone, except for one, right? Except for one, he does give up a couple hits that were like, that wasn't great. They did make contact, but the stuff in the zone and all that, they weren't really consistently hitting. So to me, I thought last night was as encouraging a first start back you could have had from Yu Darvish, given everything that he's been through. And that's really exciting. Look, this team, man, you've got Cease, you've got King, you've got, hopefully it looks like, Musgrove has been great lately. Was awesome in his last start. And then you have Darvish, potentially. If you work him back, you can win post-game series with that. I don't care what anybody says. I think that the whole pitching wins in October thing gets slightly overvalued. I do. I know this is like, and again, I'm just dropping my nuclear takes, because for me, I think they overestimate the type. You need good pitchers for sure, but I don't think you need 3 Garrett Coles. I don't think you need 3 Yamamotos or prime Kershaws in order to win. I mean, not to be mean, but especially not prime Kershaws in the playoffs, if you know what I mean. But I don't think you need that. I think you need solid pitchers, because look at the rotation last year. John Gray and Jordan Montgomery were like some of the big producers for the world champion Texas Rangers. And then they also have a Scherzer, and they have some ace quality guys out there like Uvalde. But I think that as long as you have okay pitchers. So to me, I look at it as Cease has got ace potential, Musgrove has light ace potential. And then you have Michael King. He's got light ace potential. And to me, you also look at Yu Darvish. If Yu Darvish isn't super on point, you also have this bullpen that can carry him through if maybe he's going to need some more time to ramp up and get ready for those playoff games. And also in the playoffs, I also just kind of trust the guy. He's been pretty good against good teams and in big spots for this team, at least in his Padres tenure so far. And speaking of bullpen, we got to talk about that, guys, in just a second. And of course, we're going to be talking about Tatis. Don't you worry, you little goobers out there. Don't worry, I got you covered. But first, I need to take a second to talk to you about our friends over at Prize Picks. And here's the thing, we've been hanging out with Prize Picks for a long time. And you know why? Because they are number one. I'm not kidding. They're the number one daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. And unlike other apps, it's just you against the numbers. Pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. And You might have heard football is back today. And guess what? Check out this deal that PrizePicks has going for you. One Caleb Williams passing yard gets you one win on PrizePicks every week in September. That's right. Only 1 yard that he passes, which for my non-football fans, that's nothing. I mean, especially for people who live in the States, I'd be pretty shocked if you don't know the basics of football, but basically that's nothing. It gets you an automatic win every football weekend in September. 4 weeks of potentially free W's. So don't miss this deal on PrizePicks. It's great. And they've got all sorts of other things too. They've got community tabs, with playing with people like Drewski, Joe Budden, and MMA champ Sugar Sean O'Malley. You can find that in the community plays section. They've got all sorts of cool stuff for you. And you can also get your money in as quick as 15 minutes. It's fast, it's efficient, and they've got all sorts of different deals like that Caleb Williams one all the time. So go check that out, guys. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB and get $50 instantly when you play. $5. That's right. Just code LOCKEDONMLB on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the bonus, guys. It's just guaranteed. You're welcome. PrizePicks, run your game. Go check it out. And just like that, everybody, we are thriving and vibing into segment. That's, I kind of like segment. It's like a second, Ooh, I like that. Did I just stumble on something? The segment? Probably not. Let me know in the comments, guys. But let's talk about this Padres bullpen that was absolutely on fire last night, except for one man, and that is Yuki Matsui, who has been the bane of my existence for a long time now. He gives up, unfortunately, a 2-run shot. I'm sorry, was it 2 runs? Yeah, it was a 2-run shot to Trey Sweeney in the top of the 4th inning, which was not ideal, of course. But here's the thing. I know people are going to come for me on Yuki Matsui because I feel like I've been defending this guy for the longest time on this podcast, and I still sort of stand by it, but every single time you're starting to believe in him, he falls apart. And frankly, he just hasn't been all that good of late. He gave up not just a run in this one, he also gave up a run in the St. Louis game. He gave up a run in the Mets game. It just seems like he's this really okay pitcher. Like, he hasn't really had a bad month in particular. June was his worst when he had a 4.91. But when you actually look at his overall ERA, he's kind of consistent. 3.38 his first month, 3.48 his second in May, then June the 4.91, then in July 2.89, August 3.38, and then of course September in the one, in the third that he's pitched, a 13 ERA. But he's been steady. He's still pretty good, and I think that he's a guy that and I've said this multiple times, so sorry for repeating myself, but if he's like the worst arm in your bullpen, you probably have a really good bullpen. You know what I mean? And Matsui, I still think the thing with him is high leverage, and he just seems to give up the runs, those big hits at the worst conceivable times, which I don't think necessarily means that he's like a choke artist. I think that this is a guy that could get better as time goes on. I still believe in the man. I really do. And I know that sounds crazy. I know that makes me sound ridiculous, but I just look at the fact that guys don't consistently hit his best pitches. And to me, that means he's just got to find the right location. His expected ERA is in the 91st percentile. You know what I mean? And that means something. Yes, he doesn't throw particularly hard. His fastball velo isn't up there. His velo in general isn't up there. And he does walk some batters. But to me, I look at his pitching repertoire, every single pitch. Every single pitch. No one's hitting, except for the expected batting average on his sweeper, which he doesn't even throw all that much. They're hitting like below 220 on each of his pitches, and they're not slugging all that much. And in fact, it seems like he's getting just a tad bit unlucky with the home run luck. Just giving up home runs every fly ball just seems to go out when Matsui's pitching. I'm not saying this guy's like a stud. I don't even think that he's the future closer after Suarez. I think that ship sailed a while ago, also because Suarez is great. But I just think that it's worth throwing out there that Matsui is still pretty good, and while he can be frustrating, not every reliever in a bullpen is going to be aces. And I'm totally fine with that. And I think everybody should be too. And I do think that he has potential, especially if he stops throwing so high up in the zone. I think that's what gets him the most. And if he can trust that, not throw up too high in the zone, and he can also use his split finger, which he has a 40.5% whiff rate on, or even his slider, which he has a 44.3% whiff rate on, I think that he's going to be a really solid contributor and can be great in this stretch run for the Padres. But instead, for now, he's the one bullpen arm that you feel the most nervous about. If not for this one guy, and he just made his return, Wandy Peralta for the Padres, his return since July 9th. I think the big thing with Wandy Peralta has been one, he hasn't been very good so far. 4.37 ERA on the season. He's good in this game, doesn't give up any runs. 1 inning, strikes out 2. That's nice to see. I think the thing with Wandy Peralta before is that he just couldn't miss any bats. And that was one of the problems with him and Santos so early on in the year, where Santos would give up home runs like it was nothing, and then Wandy wouldn't be getting enough strikeouts. So too much would be reliant on the balls being put in play and whatnot. But alas, he does come up here. Adrian Morejon, he comes in 1 inning, no runs, no hits, just a walk and 2 strikeouts. He's the other one that's been consistent. Does he still have a thing like Yuki, where I'm just a little bit nervous about him in a big situation? That's just a me thing. I almost don't even have numbers to prove it. Sure, but he is transformed into a genuinely just heat. Like, this guy has the spice when it comes out of the bullpen, so we love him. Tanner Scott, he goes in an inning, doesn't give up a run. Jason Adam goes in an inning, doesn't give up a run. Robert Suarez comes in, obviously, as always, doesn't give up a run. And then Jeremiah Estrada comes in. He ends up getting the win, as he's the one to preserve the lead in the top of the 10th. But speaking of top of the 10th, how did the Padres get there? Again, this is what's the joy about this team. And seriously, someone had actually messaged me being like, and it's a friend of mine, like someone who does like really good baseball analysis and work, and whatnot, not a media person, just a friend, who was like, at some point, are the Padres always going to make these comebacks? And I was like, agreed. But what's so good is their starting pitching is getting more exciting with Musgrove and Darvish, and then they have a great bullpen. So even if the amazing high leverage stuff regresses a little bit, the rest of the team has improved to make up for whatever you lose in that, right? So I'm really excited about that. And you saw exactly why with Jackson Merrill, bottom of the 4th inning, after a bunch of guys get on base, 3-run home run. He looked amp. It was a Bogarts walk and a Jake Cronenworth single. First pitch. I talked about it with Arm Layton on yesterday's show yesterday. I really recommend everyone go check out for more detailed thoughts on Merrill than just what I've been giving, but just kind of the cliff notes is just, I'm just amazed at how he's tapped into power. I'm amazed that his lack of walks doesn't really matter if he's a guy who's going to hit for so many extra bases, play great defense, and also if it's just hard to strike him out. So yes, he doesn't walk. I understand that. Like, we would like to see Jackson Merrill become a little bit better at, taking some more pitches maybe. But if he's making this much contact and he's such a tough out, right? Like, this guy is such an impossible out for teams right now, because even if you get him to swing, he's not necessarily a patient hitter, right? He swings at some bad pitches. And frankly, he's in the 9th percentile in chase rate, but he always makes contact. His bat to ball skills are next level special, right? So really love to see that. And the fact that if you look at like some of his other stats, his expected slugging this year is 547. His current weighted on base is 351. His expected weighted on base is 375. He hits the ball hard as heck. Merrill is just so special, man. But I really recommend everyone go checking out Aram Layton and I's analysis and breakdown of why it seems like he's really breaking out in a big way on yesterday's show. So go check that out. And then in the bottom of the 5th inning, and then nothing happens for a while, by the way, in terms of any runs scored. But the bottom of the 5th inning, Manny Machado, who has been awesome for a while, he's almost been underrated this year, almost, in a really bizarre way. And maybe he's being underrated just by like us. I think he's, how like in fantasy football, like Mike Evans is good every single year and it's almost gotten boring. Machado has been good for so long, and I think that for so long this season that we've almost like, yep, that's Machado. And we're almost, I don't want to say taken for granted, but it's just been a little bit forgotten because it's been more fun and thrilling to talk about the Luis Arraez trade and Jackson Merrill being Rookie of the Year, which, by the way, it's officially getting to the point where, you guys know how I've been on this situation. It's officially getting to the point where it's like, I actually will be a little bit upset if he doesn't win, because it really feels like this is like every game, this guy's doing something big every game, and he has the defense. Skeens pitches once a week. Like, at some point that has to matter. I feel for him because he really is having like a Rookie of the Year season that you don't see from pitchers of his age. Like, you just don't see it. But Jackson Merrill, it just seems like it was more than just July. It seems like this is going to continue for the rest of the season. So I really think it's getting to the point where it kind of has to be Merrill, but that's just me. And we'll talk about that in the future. But love to see that, and love to see Machado come through, driving in the tying runs to, in fact, both Tatis and Luis Arraez. Hitting a ball, speaking of first segment, hitting balls outside the zone, good hitting, low and middle of the plate. He scoops it, as he's very well capable of, don't get me wrong, but he scoops it, allowing both runs to score. For a second when Tatis scored, I actually thought like he pulled something for a second. I was a little bit worried the way he ran into home plate, like he stopped a little bit. So I was like, oh, please no. Just a little bit in the back of my head. But of course, as we saw what occurred in the rest of the game, he turned out to be just fine. And we're going to talk about that, guys, in just 1 second. But first, I must discuss with you one of the legendary sponsors of this podcast. Here's the thing, man. When it comes to this podcast, I am a fan of absolutely saving y'all some money. And when it comes to Ibotta, they are right there for you, man. Sandals, sunscreen, snacks for the kids. What do they have all in common? You can save on purchasing these items if you use Ibotta when you get cash back all summer long or all fall long, frankly. If you want your lattes or what's like the fall equivalent of the snacks and the sunscreen and all that. Probably like a pumpkin spice latte, stuff like that. Excuse me. And sorry about it for the cough. But check that out, guys. It is great. Basically what it does, it's an app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. Earn on hundreds of items from groceries, beauty supplies, toys, whatever you want. You want a little action figure. You want something like my Pikachu or my Tatis right here. That they can help you save money to do just that. The average Ibotta user earns $276 per year. That could cover an entire trip. That can cover multiple Padres tickets. Whatever you want, they have you covered. You can save on over 2,400 brands and shop at over 1,000 retailers, including your favorite grocery stores, Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. It's time you joined over 50 million users and you use Ibotta to earn cash back every time you shop. It's great. We love them very much. Right now, Ibotta is also offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using the code LOCKEDONMLB when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use code LOCKEDONMLB. That's Ibotta, IBOTTA, in the Google Play or App Store and use code LOCKEDONMLB. Go check that thing out. And just like that, everybody, we are thriving and vibing into the final segment of this show. And of course, you know what I'm going to talk about. But first, after the Manny Machado tie, the Padres had one of the rarest kind of situations that has happened for this team in a while, right? You get a David Peralta walk, then you get Mason McCoy sacrifice, and Luis Arraez gets a single, and actually David Peralta might have been able to move to third base, but there's actually this weird base running incident that occurs where it was hit weird, and it might have hit right at the second baseman, so he was forced to freeze, and then he fell, so he had to retreat back to second. So that doesn't happen super often in baseball, but it was the rare single where nothing changed. You know what I mean? Or not nothing changed, but it didn't move up the runner, I should say. So that was unfortunate, but it happens. And also I loved looking at the body language of Peralta, everyone just being so happy that Tatis is back, including your Peralta, who'd been playing so well for this team. That's what I love about them, is that every time someone's gone down, the depth on this team has been so great that it's Donovan Solano has been awesome, and then David Peralta in Tatis's absence has been great. So I really, really love that. And what I really like about him is just that he's a vet, and I like having a vet on the team, especially when they're actually performing, unlike some past vets that the Padres have brought in that were a little bit washed up. But anyway, Arraez gets that single. Tatis lines out on the first pitch, unfortunately. Arraez steals second. Profar draws a walk. Machado lines out. It was well hit, but unfortunately it just happened to not land in the right spot. Then in the bottom of the seventh, you get Xander Bogaerts drawing a walk. You get Jackson Merrill launching a double. Again, this guy just doesn't stop. Donovan Solano draws a walk. Then Mason McCoy, unfortunately, hits into a fielder's choice. I thought he was about to pull it through, and Luis Arraez grounds out, but it's okay. It was just a little bit annoying. It was just two separate innings where it looked like the Padres were going to take the lead because they've been doing that all year, driving in runners when they're on base. And this seemed to have been the one time they didn't. So I'm not going to lie to you guys. Part of me was I bet they just don't take this one today. Because it almost feels like the universal, fates and litigious fates out there are you guys have had too many, come from behind, runs and scoring position things this year that you're not going to have this one, unfortunately. But of course, that doesn't occur. Thankfully for the Padres bullpen, which we talked about before, comes through big. And then, of course, that brings us to the bottom of the 10th inning. Jackson Merrill He starts off at second base, of course. Mason McCoy strikes out, still is waiting for his Padre moment. And frankly, I think it'll come at some point, hopefully. And then here's what we got to talk about. Every now and then, numbers become dumb, you know? And is it easy for me to make fun of the Tigers for being like, you know what? I would rather face Fernando Tatis Jr. And that's why I think he was so excited when he hits the walk-off single that allows Jackson Merrill to score from second base easily with his speed. Tatis loses his mind, running across, shouting. He takes his shirt off. Guys, folks, look, we don't got to go there, but my man was looking great. Everyone was excited about him when they pour the Gatorade on him. He does a little flex thing or whatever. It was amazing. I know a lot of people were having fun with that. Just excellent stuff from Tatis, but I think he was so amped because they walked Arraez intentionally. Now, I will say, in fairness, Luis Arraez has been doing very well, but in a somewhat small sample size as of late. Over his last 8 games, he has not struck out, which, by the way, he's only struck out twice since the All-Star break, which is, again, I just want to tell everybody, Luis Arraez, again, he's a good player. Those type of stats are just fun, but don't forget that he's not necessarily like Mike Trout because of that, right? Because he doesn't draw as much walks and he doesn't slug enough, right? But even still, over these last 8 games, he has a 173 WRC plus, 429, 487, 486 slash line. He's just been hitting multi-hit games. He's drawn a walk or two, and then what I love is he's also chipped in some stolen bases, which is nice. Is he getting a little bit lucky? Maybe, right? Because he's a BABIP guy, but the problem is, again, he's always been that. So yes, he's never going to be like a hard hit guy, but I'm just hoping that maybe this is a sign that Arraez is finally going to be doing what, he's been an okay player for this team. Don't get me wrong. He's been a solid contributor. Even though he's not at the peak of his powers, which is like a low, 800 OPS or high 700 OPS guy, I think, which is huge for this team. Don't get me wrong whatsoever. But I'm hoping that he can return to that because so far he's just been an okay batter, basically, for his Padres tenure. But, those last 8 games, hopefully it's a sign that he's recovering from his injuries and stuff. He's playing through it. He's figuring it out. And he's going to be huge because I still stand by Luis Arraez. One of the things that I think can happen in the playoffs sometimes, when you have guys that aren't only home run dependent, guys who hit 230, and these guys could be good players, by the way. But guys who hit 230 and they hit like 25, 28 home runs, that doesn't mean they're bad, but I think that sometimes is more conducive to regular season success. Postseason, sometimes if you're a guy that's just known for putting the ball in play, you can have a Linsanity run and you could be great. Go look at Eric Hosmer. Why do you think Eric Hosmer was so good that one year? Because even though he put the ball on the ground, which is bad, bottom line is he was putting the ball on the ground. He was putting it in play. And sometimes you can just luck into having a great 3-game series. You know what I mean? So I think Arraez, on top of what I was just saying, he's also just got such an amazing feel to hit. I feel like that guy's going to have some moments. I really do in the postseason. I think he's going to be solid. I think he's going to be a pest to opposing pitchers. I'm excited for him, and I'm really hopeful that he has some really big playoff moments for this team. But of course, Tatis with the walk-off, and believe it or not, I believe the first walk-off of his career, and that's weird, right? Really, really weird. Because as we all know, we've seen Tatis be very clutch before. Heck, we've even seen the not the last time they played the Dodgers, because we all know how that ends, but the previous time in the playoffs when they lost, that he also hit a huge home run, but Cody Bellinger robbed it at the warning track. You have the Cardinals series, when he became the cover of MLB The Show, when he hit the 2 home run game. But he's never had a walk-off, and that was fascinating. So he's had all of these amazing moments that are clutch, but for some reason, not the game-winning clutch. Isn't that funny? It's just a funny thing to know that it was like his first one. Or at least I'm pretty sure it was his first one. It's just funny to know. This does not mean he's never been clutch. He has been. Earlier in the year, remember the Cubs game when they came back from 8 runs? I bring that up one a lot. He swings at like a super crazy pitch, and that's what brings them ahead, right? But it wasn't a walk-off. So it's just funny. Like, this is what's so funny about baseball. So love to see him there. So on top of walking Arraez in order to face him, and it's not like Tatis was doing awful, by the way, because in this game he already had a hit at this point. He had a double. Like, I just don't want to face that guy. I get a little bit, though, the Arraez thing. I get it a little bit. I don't get it as much as, only because of what I just mentioned, which he's been hitting better lately. I didn't get it when they walked him to face Profar, because Arise had actually been struggling for a while. I think that was dumb. And, Nationals, or was it the Nats? Yeah, it was the Nats. Like, that was dumb. This one, at least you can maybe look at, this guy knows how to make contact, and maybe we can just hope to get the strikeout from Tatis, who is not, he doesn't have an egregious strikeout rate or anything like that, but he is more susceptible to it than a Luis Arise or some other players. So I think that was the calculus, and as a result, a little bit of disrespect maybe, and then he hits the walk-off, his first one. That's why I think you saw Tatis absolutely lose his mind. Again, this team has just been night and day different from last year. I think that's attributable to just them being so historically bad, right? I think it can be attributed to them being so historically bad in these situations last year, but I think it can also be attributed to players just playing better, figuring out some things, some more depth on the roster. Even something for Mike Schill. I think that's totally fair if you want to give him some credit. I think he's done an okay job in extra innings games this year. They are 8-1. That's great. In 1-run games, they are 20-15. You compare that to last year, and like I said, it's night and day. Last year in extra innings, they were 2-12, and in 1-run games, they were 9-23. Total turnaround, man. Total turnaround. So can they keep this up? I don't know. But it just seems like they can't do any wrong. And, as they race for the end of this season, it's going to be really interesting. They've got a series against San Fran after this last game against Detroit, then 2 against Seattle, 3 against San Fran, 3 against Houston, 3 against the White Sox, which is great. And then that's when it gets crazy. So, guys, the regular season games, in a way, like, we're just kind of vibing right now. But in terms of playoff positioning, it might come down to those last 2 series of the year, against 3 against the Dodgers and 3 against the D-backs. That's going to be fascinating. I can't wait to see how it pans out. But with that all being said, guys, that about does it for today's edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, the only pod that may be better than the Padres themselves. Remember to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. Feel free to send me questions for the mailbag on Monday. And tomorrow, we are going to be talking with Ben Kaspick of Locked On Giants to preview that aforementioned upcoming series. Should be a lot of fun talking to Ben. And the Giants just made a whole lot of news because they just signed, extended Matt Chapman for 6 years. So that should be a lot of fun, and I cannot wait to talk to him. Always a delight, that nerdy old Benevins. That should be a lot of fun. So looking forward to that. Stay tuned. And again, send your questions and whatnot for Monday's show. And until next time, stay safe. And of course, stay faithful. My faithful homies. Take care.